Hi, this is Randall with Carter Hill Honeybees. Today's Sunday, August the 8th, 2021. Honey harvest season is over, so now it's time to go around and check my colonies for their varroa mite loads. This is basically going to complete the first year of my mite treatment strategy. So today I'm going to get the information that's going to answer the question for me how effective my December oxalic acid treatments was in keeping the mite count low through spring buildup and the main nectar flow through honey harvest, which is just now concluded. Today I'm going to pretty much get to verify my annual mite control strategy, and also I'm going to apply my mite treatment today after the mite wash, and also this is the beginning process here in August of getting my colonies ready for the spring of 2022. So what I do this month on my honey production colonies will determine how good my colonies will be next spring and what kind of honey crop I'll have next year. So I can have a great impact on that with what I do right now. I've been waiting about 14 months for the answer to this today, so I'm really excited. The video may be a little long. I may have to break it up into 2 parts, but I feel this information today will be pretty important. So I've got my mite wash stuff ready. I've done a video on how I do mite washes in the past. I got it, my whole setup. It copies Randy Oliver on scientificbeekeeping.com. I don't use alcohol. This is water and Dawn Ultra at the ratio of half a teaspoon. But I have that in here, and that's what I use the mite wash with. It works very well. Also, before I do open this colony up, I need to make note that the colonies that you had throughout the year that had the most brood production, your biggest, most strongest colonies are the most vulnerable to the viruses that the mite transmit, because there's so much brood, the mites have so much more opportunity to reproduce. So I got to get down in this colony and find me some nurse bees to shake in my pan. This is going to sacrifice 300 bees, but you're talking probably 5 or 6 hours of egg laying time for the queen. That's a very small price to pay to ensure that what you're doing is working and ensure your colony's health for next spring. So looking at this cap brood here, it's a little bit spotty. That's kind of normal this time of the year. Now last year, in years past, I've seen excessive spottiness during high mite load times. The bees will also tend to be kind of nervous and real runny when they have high mite loads. I've noticed that as well. So that's plenty of bees in the pan, probably a little too many. Now I'm not in a big hurry to do anything with this. The field force will fly out and go back to the entrance, and the bees that stay in here are the nurse bees I'm looking for to test. So I can go ahead and put the hive back together. So that's kind of giving me time to let the field force fly out. So I'm going to take a moment. This is really important. Scan in here, make sure your queen's not in here. You don't want to wash her. Yeah, and I'm not seeing her at all. So I'm gonna get a half a cup of bees, dump in the sample. Some of them are getting away. Undump the ones that was lucky enough to escape the scoop back in there. I'm gonna give it a couple shakes up and down. That'll prevent any more bees from coming out, and I'll fill it on up. There's a line up there about most of the way to the top, which basically your basket will start floating at that point. So I'm going to set that there. Last year I noticed that the mites would just literally go to raining down within a matter of seconds, almost like one of them little snow seeds you shake. So I'm going to try that a time or two and see how that works, and then we'll come back and do the agitation. All right, we've had our sample here, and I've let it sit here probably 5 minutes. I went ahead and collected samples from 2 more colonies, and I kind of want to test this idea that the bees in this Dawn Ultra wash will kind of move around in there themselves and knock a lot of the mites off without agitation. So let's see how we did. And right now we have one mite in the wash. So now I'm going to agitate it for a minute and see if any more rains down. All right, I just got through agitating it, swirling it for a minute like this. I don't shake it up and down. I try to make it swirl like you're making a tornado in there. That's the way Randy Oliver shows to do it on his videos. And you're basically trying to make the bees roll over themselves and then help knock the mites off. So let's take a look and see if we knocked any more mites off. And I only see one. So we started with one, we have one. So that looks like I didn't have to do this any further. Also, that's a very good mite count right there. One mite per 300 bees. So that's the first hive, and I'm not gonna show you every one of these in terms of me doing the actual art of it, but I'll show you the results of all my colonies on this video. So I think I got 4 or 5 mediums of honey off of this, so that's very well pleased with that result. So here's the colony. All right, I'm not seeing any mites, so I'll swirl it for a minute. All right, right there's a minute of swirling it, and let's see what we got. Still showing 0 mites. Now that means there's no mites in the alcohol wash. I'm sure there's some mites in here, but that means the colony has either maintained a low mite count, or I got the mites so low last December that they really couldn't recover. But either way, to have no treatment of all since December of 2020, that's awesome. No mites in that wash, but I'm sure there's some in there that just didn't get captured in the wash, which is a good sign. That means the mite count is low in there overall. So here's the third colony I prepared. This has not been agitated. All right, we got some mites in this wash here. See, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I have not agitated, so that's almost 3%. That's right at the threshold where you got to treat. Now, if I find one hive, I'm going to treat anyway, but if I find one hive in here that has more than 9 mites in it, I mean, you got to treat them all. Once you get over 15 mites in here, it has a negative impact on your colony, and it's in danger of collapsing. So we got 8 mites in here, so this ought to be a good test. So I'll go ahead and agitate this for a minute. All right, there we go. I've agitated or swirled it for a minute. We started out with 8 mites in here, so let's see what we got if we agitate any more down. So let's take a look. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we still have 8 mites. So that's telling me, you know, the agitation part with this, using this detergent wash may not wash it. So far, it seems to be releasing 100% of the mites that's in the wash, which, if I remember the data correctly, this captures about 91% of the mites will actually drop through the grate to the bottom. Realistically, there's probably 9, maybe 10 mites in there. This colony definitely needs treated. If I didn't treat it, it might make it through the winter. It will be weakened for sure, but it would be doomed, I'm pretty sure, next year. It would not make it through next year. But like I say, we're going to treat it here today. This does take a little bit of time. Now, I'm taking time to explain this, but I'm probably going to wind up washing all mine, because while I'm not filming, I can do this a lot faster. So I'm going to go ahead and do the rest of these 8, and then I'll tell you what each one had in it. All right, here I have a tub of Apiguard, and I'm fixing to show you how I apply the treatment on my colonies. It's a good idea to wear the gloves. The Apiguard is a gel, if you're not familiar with it. If it gets in your, basically your hair follicles or your roots, it burns, I'll be honest with you. This is a pretty effective treatment for me. It's what I used last year. I'm going to try some other stuff down the road, but for this last year and this year, I'm going to go with what I know. and then try to learn some more, because I feel it's important to rotate this stuff and not use one thing over and over. They could perhaps, although I don't think it's happened with ApiGuard, but they can perhaps develop resistance to it down the road. I want to get into rotating my treatment. So it's at the directions say to steer this up, so I got me a little stick here, and I'm going to steer this up each time before you use it. Now when I used this years ago, before I went no treatment, which at the time I used a full dosage rate, and I caused 3 or 4 colonies abscond each year because of how strong this smells. But back then you had a scoop and a little thing to level it off with, but this syringe they sent is very nice that they use now, so I'm glad they made that improvement. So I stir that up a few seconds. So in a full-size colony like this, the instructions calls for 50 milliliters, and I'm going to go with 30 milliliters today. The temperatures is supposed to be in the low to mid 90s for the next 5 to 7 days. So if it was going to be like 100 above, I might would cut it down to 25, but I think 30 will be adequate for this first treatment. This is the first of 3 treatments 7 days apart I'm going to do. So I'll stick my syringe down there and draw up the ApiGuard past 30. So this colony had 1 mite. It's actually below the treatment threshold, but we want to treat this entire yard as one superorganism, because if that colony was to collapse, it had 8 mites per se, they would get robbed by these other colonies and it could turn into a mite bomb. So I'm going to collectively treat all 8 of these colonies. Now in my experience, it's important where you place the ApiGuard. This works, from what I understand, this works by contact. The bees don't like it, they try to tote it out the front, so I feel it's important to make the bees carry it the furthest way possible. So I put it on the very top of my medium and put it all the way to the back, and then I'm going to take the syringe and apply the dosage here, and I want to try to make it thick as possible and not smear it all over the whole board there. It will take the bees longer to move this out in that thicker condensed treatment there. If you smear it out, it can evaporate out and dry out. And once it evaporates out, it's useless. So you want it to stay liquid, and it's more effective if you put it in a big wad like that. So I've got it high on top of my box and all the way to the back. If you run an inner cover, you want the deep side down. The bees need to be able to get access to the ApiGuard on each side of it. That's important. And then I just simply put my top back on, and that's it. That's 1 colony. And I'll do the rest the exact same way. I'll come back in 7 days, apply the second treatment the same way I just did this one. The ones that had high mite counts, I'll come back and do a confirmation wash on them. I won't wash them all again because I don't think it's necessary. But that's how I apply the ApiGuard. Also, if you have a shim or something, if you have only a couple of colonies, if you have about 1.5 inch shim, you can put on top of there under the inner cover. According to Randy Oliver, it makes the efficacy better. This is what I done last year. I had very, very good results with it. All right, I've completed all the wash and treatment of this yard here. So now I'll share with you the results of the alcohol wash or the mite wash. So this is the one I filmed. So they had 1 mite in there. Very good. Kind of will lead you to think, you know, well, this is going to work. But you'll see here in a minute, we got one colony here that's got a pretty high mite count. It had 25, but this one's in really good shape. This colony here surprisingly had 0 mites in the wash. This colony has a lot of bees in it. Had a lot of bees when I harvested the honey, but it got a treatment anyway. But I know there's mites in there. They're just probably not that many. This colony here got, if we start going up, this colony here got 8 mites. This colony got 9 mites. So those are pretty much on the threshold of where you really need to treat. Now here's the first colony with a pretty high count. This one had 15. So 15 and above, you start seeing a significant impact on your colony performance. So without treatment, this colony likely would perish before next spring. It might be 6 weeks from now, 6 days, or next February, but hopefully we've caught it in time. The New World Carniolians here had 2 mites. I done a video on this colony back in March. The title of that video was the first inspection of the season. I think I inspected this back in the first week in March. It was by far the strongest colony here. A lot of bees. It overwintered with a lot of bees. I also know for a fact this is a descendant of the last group of Italian queens that I purchased. This is the one that had the high mite count. This colony's got 25 mites in the wash, so this colony's in trouble, but it's got its treatment, so hopefully we can save it. And this is another Corneolan colony from the splits of last summer, and it has a mite count of 3. So we'll go on to the next yard and I'll give you the numbers from there. So let's see what we've done here. So that one had been absconded. So this one had 7 mites. This one had 9 mites in the wash. This one had 9 mites in the wash. This colony has bees in it, but it's queenless. There's no brood in it. This one of my Corneolan splits from last winter. It had 8 mites. So this one's got a high mite count. The highest I've seen in my colony so far, 16 in it. All right, we're at the next yard. There is 6 colonies here. So this one had 22 mites in the wash. This one had 23. This one had 26. This one had 32. This is an older colony of mine. Got 8 supers off of that. It just goes to show you the higher the production, the bigger the brood nest, the bigger the mite load. This one had 5 mites. That's a New World Corneolan split from last year. This is Corneolan split from last year as well. 7 on this one. All right, we're in the next yard. There's 3 colonies here. Colony here had 12 mites. And so far this one has the highest yet. This one's got 60 mites. In our third hive over here, it's got 32 mites. So it's really high as well. All right, we're at another yard. There's 5 colonies here. I did pretty good at this yard, honey-wise, but this colony here's got 19. It's the highest in the yard. 19 mites in the mite wash. This colony has 8. This colony has 6. This colony has 5. This colony has 4 in the mite wash. Pretty amazing at the drastic difference between this yard and the last couple of yards in the mite counts. Anyway, we got one more yard to go, so let's head over to it. All right, we're on our last yard now. Colony right here got 55 mites in the wash. This colony here is queenless. This colony here has 26 mites in it. This colony here has 34 mites in it. This colony's got 24. This colony here's got 12 mites. And this colony right here has 31 mites in the mite wash. I've learned some information. This is some hard data, and the mite count, I had no idea what it was going to be going into today, but obviously with all this new information, some of the hives has done really well and some of them are still faltering. I'm going to have to kind of study on this, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to make some changes and adaptations to my mite treatment strategy. But that's what it's all about. I've got hard data. I come up with a plan. Now I can make adjustments. My initial thoughts is I'm probably going to have to harvest honey about 3 to 4 weeks earlier and initiate treatment then, which may result in me having to do another treatment in early to mid-fall. Or I may have to try some type of treatment in early spring prior to putting the honey supers on. So I'll have to study on that and see what I want to do. My transition from a treatment-free beekeeper to a treatment beekeeper begins here in the spring of 2019 in this very yard. And I want to take a few minutes and explain the sequence of events that led me to the realization that I had to do things differently in terms of mite control. So in the fall of 2018, one of the state apiaries called me and asked me to come by and do some samples. They wanted to take samples out of 8 colonies in the yard, which I brought here, and none of these colonies was involved. These are all different from that time. So I said yes, I would be glad to. So they come about the end of March the next spring and took samples from all 8 colonies. They did a mite wash, which at that time I really wasn't familiar with. Most of them had 3 to 6 mites at that time. They took samples of the comb, they took samples of the bees and mailed them off. Now the downside of that is it takes several months. It was actually in the fall, probably October, November, before I got the results from that. So that was part 1, and then they come back in October and took a sample again. And it was the same routine, mite washes, all that. And the mite count, as best I can remember, I really don't remember for sure. I think it was quite a bit higher. I think they was all above 10, but I'm not 100% sure on that. But here's the key. by the time they come back in the fall, I done harvested honey. I done lost 3 of the colonies. And by the next spring, only 3 of those original 8 that they tested was left. So that spring, I got back the results from the fall analysis in the spring as well. And so I'm looking at all these numbers, and best I can remember, it had the mite count and stuff on there. There was really no issues with nosema at all, or tracheal mites. But the 2 numbers that really caught my eye was the deformed wing virus. So when I seen that, the number was like, it was like well over 1 billion spores of deformed wing virus that they found in that bee sample. At that time, I really didn't know what that meant. I just thought, well, I see some bees in the late summer every now and then, that I can tell that their wings ain't formed out. So I didn't think that much about it, but it did catch my eye. And then the other one was that had a high spore count was, I believe it was called Varroa destructor virus. I don't know if that's a little different, whatever, but it was well over 1 billion. So that kind of got me to thinking. And then so now we fast forward to about February of 2020, and I'm just starting to become aware of beekeeping videos on YouTube at that time. So one day I was kind of searching, and I've come across this video called "Why Did My Bees Die?" by Dr. Megan Milbreath from Michigan State. And I looked down at it, and this is like an hour-long video, and I'm like, well, I'm going to take a few minutes and watch this. As I got into it, and she got to explaining things, and then she started showing pictures, and then I was just totally blown away. I was seeing for the first time explain why my bees was dying, because I would look at the combs, and I didn't realize what I was seeing, all the varroa toilets and stuff. I mean, when I was dissecting those colonies back then, when they die out, I'd look to see if I could keep the combs. I mean, probably half to 2/3 of the cells was just riddled with varroa toilets. So this really got me to thinking. Later on in the spring, I mean, I started doing research, watching videos, and trying to find people to watch and learn. Because at that point, I'd realized, I got to make a change, because I'm just falling behind with the numbers. Even making 25 splits a year, I can't keep up. I'm going to, because my goal's always been to get to 70 colonies overall. I'd have 50 honey production colonies and 20 colonies dedicated for nukes or replenishing my losses, or perhaps selling swarms, whatever. And I've been able to get to 70 colonies a few times, but always with a fall, I'm losing 15 to 25, 30 colonies. I can't get there. I can't stay there consistently. I start playing around and learning, and I find Randy Oliver's website, and I'm just really shocked the first time I see this. I see his varroa model. So I go to playing with that, and I spent several hours on that, because to kind of back up here, I had emailed Dr. Megan Milbreath and asked for recommendations, and she wouldn't make none. And at the time, it kind of frustrated me, but now that I've done this on my own, I think I clearly understand why. Because it's different areas is going to take different management styles. So I'm glad she done it that way, and in the end, it's worked out best for me. So after spending several hours on there getting familiar with Randy's varroa model, then once I kind of understand what I was seeing, and also learning some stuff about the varroa mites life cycle, how they reproduce, and how it pertains to the colony survival strategy throughout the year, and how the mite-bee ratio gets all out of whack in the summer, like this time of the year here in August. Once I get an understanding, I start putting stuff together, I start experimenting. So now, after a couple of weeks or so, then I come up with my own mite treatment strategy, which I implemented last year, and so far everything has been successful. Where I harvested honey last year. I went around and did a mite wash on all my colonies. I had one colony as high as 83 mites. I had one colony that had 0 mites, but it didn't make no honey. It swarmed 3 or 4 times every year. But on average, I probably had, in late July, I probably had around 18 to 30 mites average, somewhere in that neighborhood. Pretty much all of them was in a 20-something in the mite wash. So I come in after we pull the honey, which is what I'm fixing to do today, and I used ApiGuard at that time, because I had used it before. I was familiar with it, and I knew at that time, based on the drop, I never did do a mite wash that time, but I could see it killed a lot of mites. So I try to reduce dosage of 30 milliliters. The directions recommend 50 milliliters, so I did 30 milliliters on a 7-day schedule, and I done it 3 times over 3 weeks. And then I waited a week after the 3rd week, come back, did my mite wash, and when I started washing them colonies, I didn't wash them all. I washed about 5 or 6 of them. Every one of them but one had a 0 in the mite wash, and then one of them had 1 mite in the wash, so I was really excited. And then at that point I turned to, I think it was actually at the 2nd treatment, I went ahead and started feeding sugar water and pollen supplement. So my goal right there was to, now that I had the mite count way down, I needed to flush all those virus infected bees out. So I induced a brood rearing cycle by feeding light thin syrup, basically 1-to-1 sugar syrup, and pollen supplement. So the bees immediately went to rear and brood, and in about 4 weeks I could just see a difference as that new brood emerged. The colony built up well, and it worked a fall flow the best I've ever had since I've been in beekeeping. And then I come back in December, and between December the 5th and December the 21st, I did 3 oxalic acid vaporization treatments 7 days apart, and I tried to pick the time of the day where the temperature was between 48 and 55, where the bees wouldn't be tightly clustered, but they'd be all kind of loosely clustered, but mostly in the hive. And I didn't do a mite wash after that, and I did a mite wash on some back in March, and that's what I used to confirm it. And the mite wash showed 1 colony had 1 mite, and the other 3 or 4 I did had 0. So now today, the purpose of the mite wash today is to see how my bees has fared from that point back in March. This is kind of going to tell me if the December oxalic acid vaporization treatment is going to be able to sustain the colony through the spring buildup and the honey production season. Even though there's some products that's legal to use while the honey supers are on, I really don't want to do that. I'd rather not have any treatments on while the bees are making honey that I'm going to harvest and sell. I want to try to avoid that at all costs. So I'm trying to see if the mite treatment plan I have is going to work with 2 different treatment cycles a year. Now, from what I've learned, I think if you're further south of me, you may have to do 3 to 4 treatments a year. If you're further north, you can probably get by with 2, maybe 1. I don't know. So I think it's kind of region specific. And I say all this with just 1 year's experience, but basically it's took me a little over 2 years to get to this point. And so today's video is, I feel like for me, is very important to get this information out and hope it benefits some of you out there, because I know how expensive it is. I was calculating on the way down here, over 10 or 15, this is my 15th year, so probably over the span of let's just throw a number, 12 years, even though I've never had at any one time I've never had over about 92 colonies, and I didn't have those very long. I have collectively, due to varroa mites, have probably lost well over 200 colonies in that time. Now, since I've implemented this mite treatment strategy I have last year to the best of my ability, I have not lost any colonies due to varroa mites or the viruses that they transmit. Although I have lost some colonies, they have all been to, with the exception of maybe 1, they have all been to queen issues. They've either went queenless or the queen went to failing and they didn't successfully supersede her. So I think I've lost 3 or 4, and I lost 1 after honey harvest that absconded. I feel like it was most likely because there was not enough feed in there and it stressed them out, so they abandoned it, because I'd got back just a few days later and they'd done robbed it out, and there wasn't much cappings and stuff. There was no sign of varroa toilets in there, so I think the colony just absconded because I didn't get food back on as quick as I should have. Well, I know this was kind of a lengthy thing, but I think it's kind of important. Like I say, due to my neglect of managing varroa mites properly, I've lost countless colonies basically for a sideliner, and I have lost a lot of money, and I'm hoping this information will benefit some of you other beekeepers out there. Well, I appreciate you for joining me for this video today, and we'll see you next time.